On this article of impeachment, 47 senators have pronounced Donald John Trump, President of the United States, guilty as charged. 53 senators have pronounced him not guilty as charged. Two-thirds of the senators present not having pronounced him guilty, the Senate adjudges that respondent Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is not guilty as charged in the second article of impeachment.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff and I will be discussing that and Illinois issues. And Jeff, what has been in many ways a very historic week.
An end to Donald Trump's long nightmare, he might put it. And he was out celebrating today, February 6th, because he held up the Washington Post and he said, that really looks nice. Trump acquitted, okay? Or Trump acquittal. And yeah, the guy won. In his mind, he won. In the Democrats' mind, as Nancy said, he'll always be impeached. And he would say, always acquitted. Look, the nation's at war. Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump are at war. And they're going to be at war at the next 10 months, and whoever is going to be the Democratic nominee. And this nation has some real problems to solve. One would hope the Democrats and Republicans in the next 10 months can find a place to make amends and get some things done, not the least of which would be to let our enemies know that when attacked or when there's an enemy, Democrats and Republicans can still come together on foreign policy and military affairs. I think there are real doubts. If I'm an enemy, I might want to see what I could get away with in the next 10 months, okay? I could take some territory, flaunt their strength a little bit, because, how much will the Democrats support Donald Trump in a military issue?
Well,
perhaps nobody's talking about that.
I don't know how they're going to. I would say this. I think that would be a mistake. I don't think Donald Trump, as the President of the United States, would hesitate to take whatever actions he needs to take. And he's not going to be concerned right now with what the Democrats are going to say, because he's going to presume they're going to be against him no matter what he does, as they have been against him for 3 years on no matter what he does. I mean, that's pretty much the name of the game. Now, can these people come together? The issue right now, it seems to me, we are in a post-impeachment process. Russia collusion didn't work out. Now Ukrainian, whatever we call that, didn't work out for the Democrats. And now we're going to be having a November election of the president. He'll either be reelected or a Democrat will be elected. So now they have about 11 months to get an agenda together, the Democrats do. Trump has put together quite an agenda to run on his record, but a lot of the electorate might think, and with a lot of substance, to think, what have the Democrats done besides try to get rid of President Trump? And we hate Trump is not much of a reason to have the House Democrats reelected. They got to come up with some legislative agenda, and I think they would be wise at this point to get back to governing, maybe work on an infrastructure bill with the president, prison reform, whatever they can do to find some kind of a means to cooperate with him so they can rack up some victories of their own.
Well, before we do that, let's get back to where the rubber hits the road in Chicago, Illinois. Let's get back to the 6th Congressional District. You spoke recently with Jeanne Ives. Let's talk some local issues, which you and she were talking about, and then some national issues, and then we can come back to our T's, State of the Union, impeachment, and so forth.
Well, when we talked to Jeanne Ives, let me just set it up that Jeanne Ives, of course, former state representative, is running in the 6th Congressional District, trying to replace Congressman Shawn Cast. Because Jeanne had spent 6 years in the Illinois State House before her run out for Congress, I started off by talking to her about some of the key issues going on. And as we talk about alleged corruption in Washington, we talked to Jeanne Ives about the FBI investigation and what's going on in Springfield vis-a-vis corruption and ethics.
If you don't elect ethical people, you're always going to have an ethical lapse. You cannot write the rules tight enough. You can hope that you write them tight enough so that if they are caught, they actually are punished for that. And that's been the problem in the past, where people have just gotten a pass. And I mean, some of this stuff is just outrageous. Like the fact that all these guys were making legislation at the same time lobbying governments whose legislation would be impacted. I mean, whoever in their right mind thought that was an okay thing to do? I frankly didn't even know that you could do that. And I am shocked at the number of colleagues, including people on the Republican side, who have their own side gig, even though they're making legislative decisions on industries that they're lobbying for or working for or any of that. I mean, it's just outrageous.
It is just outrageous, and I bet a lot of voters would agree with her. We just had former Senator Sandoval. He resigned, and then he was indicted and pled guilty recently. And Jeff, we don't know, as we've talked in other shows, just where that's going to go. I don't think anyone knows where it's going to go, this investigation. But a cloud is hanging over Springfield, and certainly in this spring session, ethics is going to be, and ethics reform is going to be certainly a major topic. As Jeanne Ives said, and I know a lot of other lawmakers, I think were also surprised to find out that you could be a lobbyist simultaneously while you were also being a lawmaker. That does seem to be something that caught a lot of people by surprise.
Right, and you have an ex, what do we call it, Inspector General for the state of Illinois legislature, complaining that he or she was not really independent. You know, that this commission on ethics was bottling things up, was suppressing reports. Boy, it sounds like a real cesspool. Yeah, I don't think you can't really rely on a commission on ethics that's under the thumb of the leaders, under the thumb of Speaker Mike Madigan, to come up with some new ethical rules that are going to make Illinois less corrupt. Give me a break. If you can't make that Inspector General truly independent, forget it. Forget the commission. Come up with some good legislation. Do it soon. Do what she's suggesting. Ban lobbying by legislators. Do a few other things that have substantial disclosure of assets and income by legislators. Significant, substantial penalties. Look, I've just written the legislation for them. If they can't knock it out in a week, the lawyers who are down there ought to go back to law school. For gosh sakes, do it. I mean, seriously. Do I sound intense enough, Terry? Because I think that's what the citizens of Illinois are saying. Do it now. Right?
You know, I would say this. Governor Pritzker racked up a lot of legislative victories in his first year. Some of the mechanics of government, passing the Capitol bill, passing the operating bill or the state's budget on time, which is one of the first times that's been done over the last 15 years. It's amazing how many times they haven't passed a budget on time. So the governor has shown himself in the first year to be a pretty effective governor as far as controlling his agenda. And I would say, and the governor kind of spoke to this in his State of the State address, the governor would do well if he can bring in a different environment into the State House, because it's almost like we're in a classroom where students are used to cheating on tests, and then a new teacher comes in and puts the foot down and says that's not allowable anymore. We really do need to have a different culture here, because there has existed in Chicago, in Springfield, in so many areas across the state, a culture of corruption that many people have talked about for so long. You know, that is something we'll have to keep our eye on and see if the governor is willing to take the lead on that.
Yeah, let's start looking at the big picture in Illinois. I mean, Jeanne points out in your interview, remind people you can find the full 30-minute interview on youtube.com/IllinoisChannelTV. And about first half of it's dealing with state issues and important state issues. I mean, Jeanne we've had this recent stuff about Secretary of State office on same-day registration, 400 or 500 voters registered who shouldn't have been, okay? And Jeanne says, I don't think any of that was accidental. She thinks it was like, there's something sinister there. Maybe there should be a real investigation. I mean, the governor sort of said, oh, it's like a glitch. It's been taken care of. Let's move on. So I think, and the 6th Congressional District race is going to be an interesting race. We're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because the primary isn't until March 17th. Jeanne does have an opponent. I mean, the smart money says she's, almost assuredly going to win. May sound unfair, but that's what the money says. And so we're kind of jumping ahead to the general election between the now incumbent Shawn Cast and Jeanne Ives, the challenger, Democratic Cast, who's only been there for a year.
Shawn Cast is a freshman, and going back to where we started on our cold open with the talk about the impeachment, again, we go back to what are the Democrats going to run on, and you have the Democrats, I think, have a very tough row to hoe, and there's if the Republicans are going to recapture the House, they're going to run with a president who just recorded his highest approval rating, and that was in the midst of this impeachment effort. He just hit in the Gallup poll 49%. The economy is good. As we sit here today, the stock market's at an all-time high. So the Republicans have a variety of things that they can say, this is what we have done. And it's the old, as we tape this, Jeff, on Ronald Reagan's birthday, what was Ronald Reagan famous for saying? Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? I think a lot of people would be saying, yeah, we are a lot better off today than we were 4 years ago. The economy is much better off. So we are going to have some of the key races around the country happening here in Illinois. In Jeanne Ives' race against Shawn Cast, that's the 6th district. We're going to have it in the 14th, where Congressman Underwood is also a freshman, and in the 13th Congressional District, where Rodney Davis, who's been in office for about 8 years now, barely won re-election last time around, and it looks like he and his opponent are going to be facing off against each other again. So the goal is for the Republicans to pick up 2 and to hold on to the 13th district.
Right, and of course, it was Shawn Cast who beat Peter Roscoe, who had been there for 12 years last time around. This time it could be a very different race. We'll see. We'd like to have Shawn Cast on with you, or me interviewing him, so we can be presenting both in the 6th Congressional District. And, it'll be very different in the sense that there's, as you point out, a very strong economy. And so last time around, Trump was just getting started on that economy. And we had in 2018, 3% growth, I believe it was in 2018. 2019's gone down a bit, I think 2.3%. But Trump has had some success, certainly on the trade level with the MCA, U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement with China. Stock market today, I think, is at an all-time high. Dow Jones 29,400 thereabouts.
Right.
And as laid out in his State of the Union speech, which I thought was kind of a kinder, gentler Trump, but the mainstream media said, "Oh, this was so."
I was wondering, did they listen to it? Jake Tapper said this was nothing but red meat for the Republicans. I'm like, what are you talking about? Did you look at the same speech? Because, I mean, the president was acknowledging all these people, the little black girl that was going to get a scholarship to go to a school of her choice, the General McGee, I believe his name is, he might be the last living of the Tuskegee Airmen, the soldier that just came back and reunited with his family. Trump did a very effective use of the visitors in the gallery, and very touching stories there. I mean, I've talked to other people who said they were almost on the verge of tears seeing that family come together. So I don't know what they're talking about, just red meat for Republicans.
Well, somebody returns, I think was from Iraq and Afghanistan, comes down there in the gallery, sees his wife, who is surprised to see him alone, and his children. That's like, okay, that's really far from partisan. I would think Democrats as well as Republicans could applaud that. Yes, it's kind of a trick that Bill Clinton and others started of having plants there in the audience, but Democrats do it, Republicans do it, and it is a way of unifying the country over basically the basic humanity of this country. I mean, even to the point of Rush Limbaugh, who's a conservative hero, but he's just recently been diagnosed with lung cancer. People can usually, when somebody has cancer, Republican or
Stage 4
Democrat, you can
cancer,
kind
so
of,
I mean, he has, one
yeah, you
hopes
can,
that he recovers, but he knows it's going to be very difficult.
right. And so why wait? Usually you do the Medal of Freedom ceremony that the president was going to give him somewhere else some other time. But why wait, given what you just
Right.
said? And sure, he's a conservative hero, but is he, as some of the mainstream media? I think it was Wolf Blitzer, who's supposed to be this epitome of your neutral anchor, calls Rush Limbaugh the face of racism. Oh my gosh! I mean, come on, Wolf. Can you be more extreme? Can you?
Well,
I
and
mean,
it's just
you
ridiculous.
don't have to be a
It's just
conservative. But
ridiculous.
It's just bizarre. And but
There's
that's my
nothing to
point
point
is,
to that. In fact, the fellow that works very closely, at least one of them, I know that Rush refers to as Bo Snerdley, not his real name, of course, but is a black fellow. I mean, look,
as Trump
but
is,
it goes to the fact of the divisions in this country, and often they are being exacerbated by media who speak over the top, and that's an example.
but as Trump is finishing his speech, whatever you think about it, whether you disagree, whatever, whether you think the things are untrue, if you are the third highest person in the country, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, 79 years old, certainly somebody you'd expect to have some wisdom with age, the best you can do is sit behind the president and rip up the speech, her print copy of it, page by page, so everybody can see the disrespect she shows, not just for Trump, but for the presidency.
Well,
And then she
for the
justifies it.
Congress. Some years ago
And
when
she
Barack
just-
Obama was the president, and I criticized, I think it was Congressman Joe Wilson that yelled out, "You lied." You might think that, but you don't do that. You have to have some respect for the institutions that you're a part of. And for all people, Nancy Pelosi, as I wrote somewhere else, she's not just Nancy Pelosi sitting there, she's the Speaker of the House of Representatives. She owes it to the people. She owes it to the history and the traditions of this nation to be professional. Now, people can say, it's laughable to say that about Pelosi when Donald Trump is often non-professional. And by the way, the president said BS today in the White House at his speech. Only he didn't say BS, he said the whole thing. The president should be criticized for that. It's also one thing, I'm no stranger to cursing now and then, but I wouldn't be doing it, and I think it's inappropriate, and it's okay for us to be criticizing, whether it's Nancy Pelosi or the president, when they exhibit behavior that is not conducive to the honor of the position they hold. But Jeff, let's, unless you had something else to add on that, I want to move on to the big story, of course, this whole thing of the impeachment, and also we now had the president found innocent of the two charges in the Senate trial. And I think let's listen to, the president came out today and made some comments. Let's listen to one of the things that he had to say.
Right at the beginning, they said, "Sir, you have nothing to worry about. All of the facts are on your side." I said, "You don't understand. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter." And that was really true. They made up facts. A corrupt politician named Adam Schiff made up my statement to the Ukrainian president. He brought it out of thin air.
Okay.
Well, and so the president thought, he was being taken advantage of, that he knew that it wasn't necessarily the facts that he was saying, that it's in fact the fact that they were out to get him. Another political, many Republicans are saying political backstabber, was the one Republican senator to vote against the president on one of the two articles of impeachment, Mitt Romney. Let's hear a bit of what Senator Romney had to say when he took the floor and announced how he was going to be voting.
Corrupting an election to keep oneself in office is perhaps the most abusive and destructive violation of one's oath of office that I can imagine.
And so the senator voted against on the first article, voted against the president. He was the only Republican, but it allowed the Democrats to say they had a bipartisan vote to get rid of the president. Jeanne Ives, in that interview we did with her, said somewhere else in the interview, we don't have the clip, but she said she was astounded to hear that because obviously the man doesn't intend to be reelected in the state of Utah now that he has voted that way. Although, while he looks pretty good for his age, something to be reminded that Mitt Romney is already about 73 years old, and he's got another 5 years in office in this Senate term.
Well, it won't happen, but it would be nice if the president would adopt a different style starting today, February 6th, keep it going through November, be much more moderate in tone. Doesn't mean he can't be out on the campaign stump, doesn't mean he can't be doing his rallies, but I thought his State of the Union speech was a much more presidential, much kinder and gentler tone. Yes, he may have been pitching things that were important to his base, but he was doing it in a way that really looked a little bit more thoughtful. It would be nice if he would follow that up. Like today was sort of a disappointment. You know, I don't know if people realized he had a speech at noon Eastern time, 11 o'clock Chicago time, and it was carried by the cable networks, as these things usually are, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, but it was also carried in Chicago, I imagine around the country, by the local broadcast networks. ABC, NBC, CBS. Here was a time where he could come out, go through quickly some of his achievements, but then say where he wants to take the country in the next 10 months on a policy level. Instead, he squandered that time, given it to him as president, sort of celebrating his victory on the impeachment issue, giving shout outs to all his supporters. I think it looked small. He could have looked very big. And I would hope somebody would have the guts to say that to him as an advisor and start pushing him in that direction. People say he's on the top of his recent approval, which is like 49%, which may not be that great, but it's tops for him. If you push that above 50 and keep it there, you win, okay? I mean, even David Axelrod, senior advisor to Barack Obama, said last night, he thinks Trump is money to win. He said, look, we just don't turn out president. We didn't do it to Bill Clinton.
I don't think there's ever been a president turned out who's had an economy as strong as this is, running for re-election. And even James Carville, on an MSNBC interview this week, said, criticized the Democrats for not talking about things that matter to the American people, and that the whole idea that they've been pitching is Trump this, Trump that, Russian collusion, Ukraine, and none of it is the kind of thing that is impacting someone when they try to get gasoline or go to the grocery store. So,
well, Terry, can we just let's turn to the Democrats? Let's do it. You pivot there, right? And what's gone on in Iowa? Okay, we have Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders going toe-to-toe for delegates, about 26% each. The results still aren't in 3 or 4 days later. 96% of the precincts on Thursday. When was the caucuses were on Monday night? So this could stand for Democratic Party incompetence.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, the image is just horrible. The people that say we want to have a government-run healthcare system can't run a caucus in Iowa.
But the problem that the Democrats have now, they now have 4 candidates, have more, but these are really the 4, if anybody's going to win of that 4, they'll come from that group.
And those
you
are
have Biden, you have Sanders, you have in tops on that race were Buttigieg and Pete Buttigieg, I never say his name right, mayor of South Bend, and Bernie Sanders, socialist from Vermont, splitting 52% of the vote. And on the delegate count, pretty similar.
Okay, and then we also got the vice president and...
Well, yeah, we have the vice president doing terrible. Vice president came in 4th place, edged out by Elizabeth Warren. They together have about 1/3 of the vote, so a half of the vote.
So you still think Elizabeth Warren's in the hunt?
The point is, they're all doing well enough, and it's projected they will do well enough if they want to. to stay in till the summer to the
Maybe.
convention,
I don't know
which
that
means
that's
you
gonna
have a
happen.
brokered convention.
Well,
but if that happens,
could happen. Well,
nobody
let
can win.
me just say,
That's my point.
look, let's go back to the Iowa caucus was just a disaster. Tom Perez, the DNC chair, just announced today on February 6th that he says, look, you guys in Iowa, you screwed this up so much, just go back and recount everything. This dribbling out of partial returns is ridiculous. He said there's going to be 3 victors. You got Buttigieg in Iowa. You're probably going to have Bernie Sanders in New Hampshire, and you're probably going to have Biden down in South Carolina. Lindsey Graham, who's from South Carolina, because he knows the state, and he said the black vote in South Carolina will probably give Biden a victory there. So that will take us through the early part of these primaries, but I'm not sure that Elizabeth Warren is necessarily going to be in that lead. And to your point, I had written somewhere else this week that, I don't think it's going to necessarily happen, but this is the most likely time in my lifetime that we could have a brokered convention. We could have, for the first time in over 65 years, where it's going to take more than one vote to select the nominee, at least in the Democratic convention. And you might have the man that's entering with all the money, the former mayor of New York City, Mike Bloomberg. Maybe he's the sharpest guy here, sitting on the sidelines and letting the other people beat themselves up while he raises his awareness. Let me stick a video in here, because I think this is a stark thing. This is just a couple of clips of what the president has been doing and the image he's projecting over just the last month.
Jewish state.
Soleimani's hands were drenched in both American and Iranian blood. He should have been terminated long ago. Signed it. I've signed 9 pieces of bipartisan legislation aimed specifically at combating human trafficking domestically and around the globe.
So the president has been keeping a strong agenda going on, we see in those 3 events, and I didn't insert also he did the deal with the Chinese during this time. So, and the signing of the USMCA. The president is projecting an image of him moving the agenda along, and that is certainly contrasted with this disaster in Iowa and the Democrats, where they've been entirely focused over the last 6 months on nothing but impeachment. They're going to have to turn their game around pretty quickly if they're going to get back in this presidential race and hold on to Congress.
The savior, if there's going to be one for the Democratic Party, if it goes to a brokered convention, and it's sort of looking in that direction now, it's Mike Bloomberg. $55 billion. He's starting to move numbers in the national polls. He's already spent about $200 million in advertising. Could be Deval Patrick, in the model of Barack Obama, African American, twice governor of Massachusetts. Could be a senator like Tim Kaine. Any of those 3 people, I think, are looking better than the 4 top people in the race right now. But the Democrats, as you point out, clearly have to redirect their efforts away from impeachment toward the issues and they say healthcare in the Democratic Party,
see, Jeff,
climate change are the 2 most important issues for them.
We'll have to see, and of course, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Please comment, and Jeff, we'll see you next week.